In early January every year in Galveston, Texas, we hold the Keep On Tookin conference. You remember the slogan, Keep On Truckin, from the Robert Crumb cartoon? And you remember, here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. Well, once we've taken the 12 steps, our job is to keep on tookin. We have main speakers, panels with attendee participation, and, this year, Father Tom from Oakland, California, who is AA and Al-Anon. There is also a Q&A session as the last session of the weekend. As the recordings are available, I will upload them here as a guest spot on the podcast.
And Libby D is going to open us with a prayer.
All right, Libby!
Hello, my name is Libby. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Libby.
The Texas AA prayer. Our Father, we come to you as a friend. You have said that where 2 or 3 are gathered in your name, there you will be in the midst. We believe you are with us now. We believe this is something you would have us do and that it has your blessing. We believe that you want us to be real partners with you in this business of living, accepting our full responsibility and certain the rewards will be freedom and growth and happiness. For this we are grateful. We ask you at all times to guide us. Help us daily to come closer to you and grant us new ways of living our gratitude. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Libby. Cara is going to lead us in the preamble. Sorry, stole it from you.
Good morning, I'm Cara, I'm an alcoholic. AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Thank you, Cara. And now I've asked Donna to come and read our speaker's favorite selection from the Big Book.
Good morning, my name's Dana, I'm an alcoholic. That was in June 1935. He never drank again. He too has become a respected and useful member of his community. He has helped other men recover and is a power in the church from which he was long absent.
Thank you, Donna. And now let's welcome Tim, who's going to do our presentation.
My name is Tim, I'm an alcoholic. Now I'm going to talk about disinfectant. I think this is one of the underrated topics in recovery. I've been coming to America for many years, and what I've learnt is that whilst we have germs in Europe, boy do you have germs here. Everything is bigger and better or worse or something in Texas. So if you get a little cut, it might get a little bit infected. If Europeans get a little cut here until we're used to the germs, we get boils, we get carbuncles, we get rashes over our entire bodies. So I always travel with a little tube of something British called Germaline. Now Germaline is this very sticky pink ointment. You can smear it on anything. You can smear it on cuts, you can smear it on bruises, you can smear it on toast, serve it as an hors d'oeuvre. You can use it as a draft excluder, a lubricant in your vehicle. I mean, it's perfect. It's our WD-40. Anyway, this morning I was brushing my teeth and my mouth started to go numb. I thought, this is not good. And I looked down and discovered I'd been brushing my teeth with Germany.
Very nice and bright.
So you should be aware that anything I say today has the authority of someone who at 32 years sober brushes their teeth with disinfectant by accident. Now, I know I'm supposed to talk about AA literature. I go to Al-Anon too. I'm supposed to talk about AA literature, but there's a wonderful line in the big book where it says, there are many useful books also, which gives me carte blanche to talk about whatever I want. There was a poet who I'm very fond of who died in the early 70s. He died rather abruptly. And one of his poems, I read a passage from it yesterday and it struck me as pertinent. And I'll read the little passage and then go through it. Some men grow down, cursed. Why drink so 2 days running? 2 months, oh, seasons, years, 2 decades running. I answer, smiles, my question on the cuff. Man, I been thirsty. He was one of us, needless to say. Some men grow down. You see, one's supposed to grow up. There was another poet, a British poet called Philip Larkin, and he was born in a city called Coventry. And in his 50s, he was on a trip with someone, and the train stopped in Coventry, and they weren't getting out. And he noticed, and he said to his companion, Coventry, that's where I failed to grow up. Whilst other people were growing up, I was growing down. I was going in the wrong direction. I remember at school other people seemed to be heading towards success and careers and making a go of it. And I was heading in the opposite direction at the age of 12, 13 and 14. So when he says, some men grow down, not up, down, cursed. I didn't know why I had no interest in the world, why I had no interest in being here, why I didn't have the skills, why I felt out of place and awkward, just like, well, I think like a lot of people, like a lot of non-alcoholics. But I wasn't growing through that. I wasn't getting over it. I wasn't learning any lessons. And I blamed everything. I remember at the age of 11 thinking, if I ever have the misfortune to have children, I'll make sure they're not a Virgo, because I'm obviously messed up because I'm a Virgo. Now, that may be true, but that's a different question. I was looking for what the curse was. There's a Russian comic writer who was also very depressed. All comic writers are also very depressed. And he wrote a book about why he was very depressed. Zoshchenko is his name, called Before Sunrise. And he concluded that something happened before sunrise, something happened before he was born, to place him in the world unable to live in it. I was looking for what the curse was, and I never found it. Why drink so 2 days running? When I wake up the next morning, I discover the easiest way to get through the day is simply to carry on where I left off the night before. And I was like that as a teenager. Why drink so 2 days running, 2 months, oh seasons, years, 2 decades running? One of the reasons I'm very keen to work the AA program is that if I were to drink again, it could be 2 days running, it could be 2 months running, it could be seasons and years and 2 decades running. Suzanne Vega says, don't uncork what you can't contain. And I've worked with a lot of slippers over the years, and they all thought they could have a lick of the sherbet and come back and pick up where they left off before. And of course you can't. And if you can, it was providence, it wasn't skill or common sense or anything like that. And I love this. His question on the cuff. This isn't an off-the-cuff answer. It's an on-the-cuff answer. He's thought about this. Man, I was thirsty. And I'm thirsty before the first drink. Now, obviously drink didn't satisfy me because that's where I would have stopped. It's because it didn't satisfy me that I had to have another one and another one and another one. There are a couple of lies about my addiction to alcohol. And the first one cranks up when you ask me why I was drinking. And I say, well, it was my childhood and I didn't fit in, and I had this sort of gaping spiritual void within me, and I was trying to fill the void with alcohol, or I was trying to, even Jung fell for it. You know, people are drinking because they, at some level, are trying to connect with God, and alcohol is a substitute for that. And I would point to my depression and my anxiety and my desire to fit in and the release from care, boredom and worry and all of those things. But what the book says, you say that's what you hear in the fellowship. What the book says is that he has reasons, he has excuses with which he is satisfied some of the time, but none of them make real sense. So when I look at the physical craving, which is out, if you're new in AA, I don't think many people are, but some might be in their first few months. The physical craving, it's one of those technical terms which is really misleading, because normally a craving for something, you have the craving before you have the thing. If you crave chocolate, the craving arrives first, and then you go and get the chocolate, and the chocolate satisfies the craving, and you're done. You're on to the next thing. Whereas the thing that it's talking about is, and I experience this many times, merrily rolling on through my day, and I casually have the first drink, not out of desperation, not because a spring has tightened tighter and tighter in my stomach until I can't bear it any longer and I burst, and I'm just casually having a drink. And once the drink is inside me, something is activated by that, something is lit up by that, so much so that people, when they met me in a bar, me having had one drink, they said, "You're drunk," because something happened to me when I had a drink. I was so obviously different. And what is activated is the desire for another one and another one and another one. And I think people pretty well understand that aspect of the physical craving. I think what is less well understood is the fact that that craving is the thing that will carry people on for months and years and decades. And the little gaps in between are just alcoholism having a breather before it resumes. One's really got to be properly sober for weeks or months, I think, for the so-called mental obsession to kick in. And the mental obsession, all of the reasons that I gave myself for why I drank a bottle of gin rather than just a schooner of sherry, none of those reasons really make sense. I say, well, I was unhappy. Okay, fine. But did I drink insanely when I was happy? Yes. So it wasn't the unhappiness, otherwise it would have been limited to those circumstances. What about non-alcoholics who drink when they're unhappy? Do they automatically crave more? No. What about traumatic childhood? Well, I know plenty of people outside AA with traumatic childhoods who are not alcoholics. Plenty of people in AA with idyllic childhoods who are alcoholics. And every single excuse I gave myself doesn't stack up when I compare it to my friends outside AA, and doesn't even stack up with my own broad experience with alcohol. It didn't satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life in full flight from reality or were outright mental defectives. In other words, I didn't drink so much because I was unhappy or stupid or mad. I wasn't psychotic. I didn't think I was a tapioca pudding. I knew who I was. I knew how to cross a road. I knew how to do things. I wasn't mad. I did dumb stuff, but I wasn't stupid. And I drank when I was happy. So it's not unhappiness. I think my image of what is going on both after and before the first drink is this, but let's look at before the first drink. I think when I first drank, yeah, I enjoyed it. But there's a little bit of my physical brain which said, oh, this is what I'm here for. And it registered something. And it was now programmed, and I think it remains programmed for the rest of my life. It's just like a little computer subroutine which sends up the command to the command and control center at the front, says, do more of that, do that again. And it doesn't do it because of anything. If you listen to people in meetings who come back from relapses, there isn't a common thread. In the big book it says we shall describe some of the states which precede the first drink, for obviously that is the crux of the problem. And you analyse all of those states, the different characters they describe. You discover the happy person drinks and the unhappy person drinks. The person who's thinking about it real hard and thinking it through drinks. The person with parallel thoughts all at the same time drinks. The person who is thinking nothing drinks. There is no common thread other than the thought arises to have a drink. There's another poet, and I opened my Kindle last night and I grabbed a book and I opened it, and this, coincidentally, was literally the first line that I read. He that is drunken hath lost the reins, is outlawed by himself. All kind of ill did with his liquor slide into his veins. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a tiny little problem with controlling people. I have a tiny little problem controlling other people, and I have a tiny little problem with other people controlling me or trying to control me. I do not like being told what to do. I bristle with antagonism at suggestions, or even that little sigh of someone to indicate that they're withholding a suggestion that they're fair burning to share with me. I don't like being controlled. And right at the end of my drinking in 1993, I had been trying to stop very seriously. And I was bewildered. Bewildered is a very good word. I was bewildered because the scales had fallen from my eyes, and I knew at cellular level that something was in charge of me, that my alcoholism was a parasite and I was the host. And it was in charge. Now, once that insight hit me, alcohol's days were numbered. And so what would I do? Alcoholism has had thousands of years to, as it were, genetically mutate and adapt itself to the human host. If I were my alcoholism, how would I cover my tracks? How would I hide from me the fact that it's the alcoholism in control? Convince the host that the host is acting under his own free will. And whenever, especially in my early years, I said I drank because, and then listed all of the reasons. I drank on feelings of all the feelings I thought prompted my drinking. Whenever I said I drank in order to, I was reporting the BS that alcoholism had been feeding me to cover its tracks so that I would continue to obey its commands. None of them are real, none of them are true. I had the first drink because I was compelled. I don't know if you've ever had those circumstances where you want to drink, or rather the thought of drinking occurs to you and you know that it's a terrible idea. You're not deluded at this point. And you have the argument and you win the argument not to have the first drink. And you're like, I'm fine now. And then alcoholism says, you know what, you're going to drink anyway. That was a charade. Up its sleeve the whole time was this big red button called the F it button. Up its sleeve the whole time was that button. It will start by negotiating with me, by seducing me, by telling me that it's a really good idea. It will convince me, it will get me to use magical thinking. If the number 7 bus comes, you get on the bus and go home. If the number 19 bus comes, you'll get on that, you'll go into town and you'll raise merry hell. 19 comes, it's not my fault I'm drinking, look, the bus came, it's obviously fake. So it runs through all of those, but behind all of them, it's in control. It's like when my other half says, what do you want to watch on Netflix? He thinks, or rather I think, he's giving me the choice. He's not. He's giving me the appearance of choice. We're going to watch the thing that he wants to watch, and by the time we're watching it, he's got me believing that he's doing me a favour, that this is the thing Alcoholism is like that. Behind everything else, it's going to win. And once that truth came through, as I say, alcohol's days were numbered, so it tried to keep that truth from me. I'd lost the reins. I thought I was riding the horse. My foot was caught in the stirrup and I was being dragged behind it for miles, saying, look how well I'm riding this thing. All kind of ill did with his liquor slide into his veins. Yeah, I was unhappy before I drank, but most children are, I think, or at least have great big doses of it. All my friends who've had teenage children, they're a nightmare. They're unhappy, and they'll, however well they're brought up, by 32 they're going to be sitting in a therapist's office blaming their parents for everything. It's just the law. But there was a solidity about the ground under me. There was a limit to how bad it could get. But what became extraordinary once I started drinking, although there were these little highs which were exciting and wonderful, at the same time there was an awareness of an endless abyss below me, that I had to be really careful with this. But I could handle it. I got this. And after a year and a half of drinking, Napoleon went to Elba. I went, don't ask me why to live in Finland. I was living in Finland in 1990, and I was sober, because I'd had a rock bottom, which is where my ego is temporarily knocked out and grace flows in. And I got me some sobriety. But the person that I reverted to sober was not the same person who had started drinking a year and a half earlier. There was an evasiveness and a mean-spiritedness and a deception of myself and others. I was detached from reality in a fundamental way. Some cord had been cut, and as it says here, all kinds of ill did with his liquor slide into his veins. Alcoholism appeared to be poisoning me whether I was drinking or not, and it was progressing whether I was drinking or not. My fundamental bond to the universe had been severed, and I was untethered and just floating wild. As he says, outlawed by himself. What happened to me after 3 years of trying to stop drinking, the last 6 months of which were in AA? The bewilderment was extreme because I loved AA when I first joined it. But I thought AA was, to use a phrase from the literature, a set of tools I could pick up in order to manage my life, in order to get a handle on things. But I kept relapsing, or rather I kept resuming drinking. There's another line from the same poem where he says, frailty gets pardoned by submissiveness. I was frail at this point, but most importantly, I recognised I was frail. I recognised I could not get to bed tonight without a drink on my own steam. I needed something, and it wasn't people. There seem to be two schools of thought in AA. One school of thought, or one maybe type of alcoholic. They come to AA very, very damaged emotionally and been very mistreated and whatever. And people say, we're going to love you till you can learn to love yourself. And it's like water on parched ground for them. For me, I lose all respect for anyone when I'm in that condition who says they love me. I think I got you over a barrel then. One of the wonderful people was Maureen, a Wimbledon housewife. Wimbledon is one of those tedious suburbs in the south of London. And she said, people came up to her and patted her damp little hands and said, there, you're going to be all right. And she knew that there was something hollow about that. And someone came up to her and said, Maureen, did you know you're dying? And she trusted her. So no one fussed around me when I was new, or rather a few people did, and it didn't work. Fussing around me doesn't work. I remember at a meeting, Pont Street in Knightsbridge, on a Monday evening, and there were 150 people in the room, and I was not the centre of attention, and this was not going down well with me, let me assure you. And so I started to scrape my chair around the floor. And there's a character in Pickwick Papers who starts to create a scene, and Dickens says she was in the process of fermenting her hysterics. And I started to ferment hysterics in this meeting. I started to perform, not that I wasn't mentally ill, but I started to perform it, just so everyone would know and that the outsides would match the insides. And I created quite a kerfuffle in the meeting, and eventually I stormed out in high dudgeon and ran outside and waited, panting, for the little dogs to trot after me to see if I was okay, like little dachshunds, padding along. Are you okay? It's going to get better. Just hang on in there, and wherever you... No one came out. And I went back in, and I sat down, and I never did that again. I remember there was a poor girl many years ago who, like me, was legitimately mentally ill. There was stuff going on there. But it was fascinating. She was playing up in the meeting something rotten. And it was really disrupting the meeting. So a couple of people went and called an ambulance to come and get her. And it was interesting because the meeting room was down the end of a narrow corridor, and there was only one main entrance. There was no other way off the property. You had to get down the corridor. And I saw her spot the ambulanceman coming down the corridor. And as soon as she saw them, I saw her look round, and then she looked back, and you could see a little calculation happen. and the performance stopped, and she immediately normalised the behaviour because she didn't want it to go so far as to get sectioned and taken off. And she was able to pull it back at that last minute, and I know that manipulation of other people, and I've done that 100 times myself, causing just enough alarm in others for it to be entertaining for me, but not so much I would get locked up. If I got locked up, I'd overshot this time, and that happened a few times. What I loved about AA was that people cared about me, not by saying they cared about me, but by taking time out of their day to show me how the program worked. Because that was the really valuable thing. A sentiment is cheap, nothing is lost nothing is sacrificed by letting sentiments drop out of your mouth like chocolate drops into other people's mouths. That doesn't cost me anything to do that. But it does cost me something to forego 2 hours of a personal interest in order to take sponsee calls. And I recognised that something of real value was being given by people giving me their time. That was what convinced me there was something in me that was worth saving. So funnily enough, although warmth and love and all of those things have absolutely got their place and are absolutely the right way to approach some people, with other people like me, it's different. And it isn't the same approach. It's the same steps, I think, for everyone, but it's not the same approach. This passage here in the big book, from 158, that was in June 1935. He never drank again. He too has become a respected and useful member of his community. He has helped other men recover and is a power in the church from which he was long absent. Now, it seems like an innocuous little paragraph, and it seems to say some very obvious things. The reason it's interesting to me, they want to demonstrate, this is from chapter 11, they want to demonstrate that something happened here which worked. Now, what was the measure of it working? Number 1, never drank again. Number 2, respected. Number 3, useful. Number 4, helping other people. Number 5, power in the church. There is absolutely no mention of his emotional condition and whether he was happy, joyous and free. So interesting. And I know that in so much of my talk about myself with other people, and my friends are the same, we talk about our feelings an awful lot. Whereas this is talking about something else. The thing which is of value is something else. It's not how I feel. I might feel good. I'm going to talk about happy, joyous and free in a bit. I think that's part of it. But the real value is something else. And I remember when I was new, there was something particularly undignified about being arrested at 12:30 on a Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon in London, having caused a traffic incident. And I remember thinking, if all AA gives me for the rest of my life it's actually 2 of these things: sobriety and dignity, the dignity associated with being sober and not drunk. That's good enough for me. And I stopped demanding anything else from recovery. One of the problems, I think, with reading the Step 9 promises the whole time, they can give rise to a sort of sense of entitlement to these wonderful emotional states at all times. I was in a meeting a few weeks ago at the Soho Recovery Centre. It's a sort of clubhouse-ish in London, with meetings with every imaginable fellowship, and it's like a sort of vortex that sucks people in from different parts of London. You go there and you see people you haven't seen for decades. I never look a day older, they do, it's delicious. But there was a chap there And he had a darkness to him which I liked. I just thought that was interesting in itself. But one of the things that he said was, if you're going to be sober in the long term, there are going to be times when you have fetal position pain. And get used to that idea. Get used to that idea. You see, I had a very bad case of, they talk about the dual diagnosis. So apart from alcoholism, I also had a second diagnosis. And the second diagnosis, some people say selfishness and self-centeredness is the dual diagnosis. There are lots of little cute versions of that. Mine was BBS, which is big baby syndrome. And essentially it was this: I want to do whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do it. I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. No one is allowed to tell me what to do, and no one is allowed to bring up anything I've done wrong under any circumstances. Big baby. There's a Japanese film called Spirited Away where there's this witch who's in charge of this strange sort of hospitality complex, a little bit like Moody Gardens perhaps, but Japanese. And with ghosts and monsters, so maybe exactly like Moody Gardens. No opinion on outside issues. Okay, back to in the film. In the film, the witch who's in charge of this has this vast, monstrous, screaming baby. It's like 20 foot tall, and it's in charge of everything. That's what needed to be shrunk down. And what I needed to do when I was new, I loved the thing that the first 3 steps, someone from North Carolina saying the first 3 steps are, make your bed and get a job. Which is wonderful because it's 2 things which account for 3 steps somehow. And I was talking to someone recently who's very, very new back, who's been in recovery in the recovery world for 7 years. And we were talking about, he was saying, I'm having real trouble getting up in the morning. And so a few weeks ago we said, well, why don't you go to bed at 9 o'clock at night, then you're able to get up at 5, because you've had 8 hours sleep and eventually your system will get used to that schedule and you'll get over the built-up tiredness, you'll be fine. And what we found out after a few weeks of doing this, when he said, I have trouble getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning when the alarm gets off, he's not having trouble getting up. He doesn't want to get up, so he doesn't. And I've done this. I remember I spent about 10 years being late for everything. And because I was late for something, I was late for the next thing. I was late to bed, I was late to rise, I was late to everything. There was always an excuse. And I thought I was having trouble with things. No, I never decided to take an action. There's a wonderful line on page 58 where it says, if you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it. Now, a decision is where I go from having a bunch of options and I'm weighing them up to having a course of action. It's only a decision if it's basically irreversible. If I'm holding the back door open the whole time to run back out where I came from, it wasn't a decision in the first place. I can tell I've made a decision to do something by whether I do it. If I don't do it, I hadn't decided to do it. I decided to maybe do it. If you decided you want what we have. Now, want to me is really interesting because it's emotional. It's not just a technical recognition that I should be sober and have a sober life and sort myself out. It's actually actively desiring the thing itself. And I remember in my first year where they would read how it works at every single meeting, I remember repeatedly hearing the line, if you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it. and I looked round the room. I thought the we, when they read that out, meant the we in the room around me. And I looked around me and I thought, well, I'm not so sure about that. These grey, tired faces, of which I was one, not particularly. It's important to know who wrote the book and why. So these were the early AAs. And the one thing, though they were very disparate, and Bill and Bob had very, very different approaches to recovery in lots of ways, they had one thing in common. The way out on which they could absolutely agree was the basic tenets of surrender, of mission of defeat, surrender to God, inventory, confession, amends, ongoing submission to God's will, and the service of God, the basic tenets of the Oxford group. They had these few things in common, but at the root of that, the whole thing circles around God being the centre of one's universe. In the St. Augustine prayer book, Sacraments of Penance, there's a description of every single defect of character. If you want to know what a defect of character is, a particular one, it's in there. And it says, pride is the putting of self in the place of God as the centre and main objective of my life, or of some department thereof. It is the failure to recognise my status as creature, dependent on him for my existence, and placed in a particular relationship with the world. I was the centre of my universe. If it was near me, it was important. If it was far from me, it was unimportant. This is the appalling lack of perspective that Bill talks about, where you can't judge the real size of things. Or if it's near, it's big. As if you held your hand, standing outside, held your hand up against the pyramid in the background, and your hand looks bigger than the pyramid if you've got one eye shut. And I had one eye shut. I had the eye on the spiritual closed, the eye on the material open. So my perspective was gone. What the we of the book had is a relationship with God. Now, what that looked like might be very, very different from person to person. With this chap, it says he frequented men's gathering places of all sorts, staying up all night. I mean, there are people in London who follow that instruction to a T, let me tell you. It may look different with different people, but that's the core of it. And the question is, do I want emotionally the relationship with God? And I only wanted that, frankly, years sober, when I burnt out the circuitry of every other option. When nothing else worked, I might as well give that a go. So that's the wanting, condition one. And also a decision for that. In some marriages, people wave the spectre of divorce in front of the other person in order to get their own way. And there's no commitment there because the door is always open. So the door has to shut on that. I have to decide what I want emotionally is the relationship with God. But then there's a second part, and are willing to go to any length to get it. Now, willingness sounds all very nice. It sounds like a sort of internal attitude and a sort of gumption and a bit of oomph. I'm willing to do it. But behind willing, there are 4 conditions. It means I'm willing to take the action even though I'm going to have to sustain 4 things. And those 4 things, the first one is effort. And the actions that AA asks of me can be tiring and stressful and challenging in all sorts of ways. It's much easier to sit and read my book and do staring out of the window. I think it's an important thing to stare out of the window for at least an hour a day. But what AA asks me to do is effortful. The second thing is it's painful. Sponsoring people is difficult because you don't know who or what is going to be thrown at you. And every little quirk in my character that has had to be worked out over the last 30 odd years has been worked out by having a sponsee come into my life who activates that defect until I learn how not to express it, and then that personality type never comes to me again, because I'm not willing to dance that dance, apparently. So being willing in AA means being willing to make an effort. Secondly, to suffer. There's going to be some pain involved, and there really is. There's going to be uncertainty. It's much easier to plough forward with your own plans than to do what I do in my job or career, or whatever you want to call it, job. My other half is sometimes asked what I do for a living, and because I tap away at a computer, he says, "Oh, he does tap." So that's my job. It's uncertain, but all I do is turn up in the morning and say to God, I guess I'm ready for work, and people ask me to do things and I do the things and then I go home again. There's no strategy there. Uncertainty can be very uncomfortable rather than having your 5-year plan. You know, like in job interviews when they say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Which I wouldn't be able to answer. I'd challenge the question and be escorted from the building, which did happen in a job interview once. They said, be yourself, and I did. So willingness is going to require these things. It's going to require suffering and pain and uncertainty and sacrifice. All of the things I want to do with my life, I won't be able to do all of them. I won't be able to do most of them. How about I pick one and do that properly? I've tried to sponsor people who have these kind of high-flying jobs as vice president, senior vice president of this and senior vice president, and I don't know how to do it because they can't do what I do, the amount of stuff I do in AA and Al-Anon. Fair enough. No one's saying they have to or should, but they'll need a sponsor that can find a way of marrying a super busy external life and all the stuff that recovery is asking me to do. I don't know how to do it. There's a sacrifice there, and I won't lie to people and pretend you can have everything. I don't think you can. I think one can have only a little bit, and that's enough. And so taking the action, being willing to take the action, has required these things. So here are the components: decide, want, willing, and then it says, if you have those things, then you are ready. So readiness is not a thing in itself. It's something that I am. If I have the desire and I have the willingness to undergo those things, I'll be ready. And I worked the steps very quickly in the first year or so. I didn't do them well. My old sponsor, Brian, talked about his best friend, Val, who had some rotten family situation, and they talked about it for weeks, probably an inheritance thing or something. And she went and saw the family and came back. And he said to her, have you dealt with it? She said, I've dealt with it. I wouldn't give you tuppence for how I dealt with it, but I dealt with it. And I wouldn't give you tuppence for how I did the steps in the first couple of years, but I did them. And they were done with a sincerity and a belief they were going to work. And because I believed they were going to work, guess what happened? They did. Because the quality of the work is not measured by the neatness of the handwriting and the complexity of the underlining system with which one goes through the big book. The success is the degree to which I let go of all of that crap and stop thinking about myself and start to live like a normal person and just get on with it and buzz along through my day. So it's not a technical matter. If in doubt, do it technically better, not technically worse. But one's got the rest of one's life to do that. We are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous and free. We cannot subscribe to the belief that this life is a vale of tears, though it once was just that for many of us. Now, here's the line. There are meetings where if you said this, you'd be punched in the face. I was in a meeting once. I used to go to a gay and lesbian group in London for many years, and we're very proud that it was a safe place. It's the only place in AA I've ever been punched, and it's the only place in AA I've ever been given a face-to-face death threat. I've had telephone death threats. They're kind of fun because the voices they put on are just so interesting. But the face-to-face one was in the safe space. That's the irony. Anyway, it is clear that we made our own misery, and I did not like this idea. Now, the word's chosen very carefully, misery. So there's going to be pain. If you love people, they're going to die, and when they die, you're going to feel as though you're being ripped in two. There we go, that's an emotion. But misery is the grinding awareness that the present state will last forever because one doesn't know how to process a damn thing. I felt for many years that whenever something happened, the only way to get over it was to have something worse happen that would displace it in my mind so that I could forget about it. I remember in the mornings of my drinking, sometimes thinking, last night I really caused some trouble, and thinking, it's amazing because my problems from yesterday seem nothing compared to the havoc I created last night. I was almost proud of myself. I had no way of processing anything. I had no way of getting past anything. I just accumulated and accumulated and accumulated. And that's the misery, is when you realise it's never going to stop. My dear old mother, who wasn't alcoholic but was French. I don't know why I juxtapose those two, but there's a gloom. She said, whoever you marry, you better make sure you marry someone whose faults you do not mind, because as they get older, they will get worse. Never better. That is misery. This is going to go on forever. Every day, everything gets a little bit worse. That is the thing which has turned out to be optional. What I like about this line, we are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous and free. I sponsor people in the following form. People come to me, I say, let's go through the book. And they read a bit out, and I say what my experience is, and they ask questions. And they don't get much of a look in, frankly. I was talking to a sponsee about this the other day. He said he gave up a long time ago thinking he was going to have a slice of the pie. Because I'm just passing on what I've got. I can't fix anyone. It says on page 15, we help people to a solution to their problems. We don't solve the problems, and we ourselves are not the solution to their problems. We help them along the way to the solution. So I just explain things. And there's a little bit of discussion about them in 1 and 4 and 8. And certainly when they start sponsoring and they've got problems with sponsees, there's lots of tactical discussions then, how you handle this behaviour, how you handle that behaviour. But essentially, I just go through the book with people. And if you don't know the book before doing that with a few hundred people, you'll know it afterwards. You don't have to sit down and memorise it. It just imprints itself on the mind, which is very helpful. So it means when you're in trouble, it will come back to you. That's the virtue of knowing it is not that you can show off in meetings. I don't consider it as showing off. It's that it comes back to you when you absolutely need it. And one of the things that you notice is how carefully and cleverly the book is written. It's not without flaw, but it's carefully written. And it's amazing how often they hedge. If, you are probably alcoholic. Or for most people, or rarely, or so it seems to us, things like that. So when they say something categorical, you pay attention to it, because they could have hedged, but they don't. We are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous and free. That means, the way I read the book is this. I say, let's pretend they put it in the book because they thought it was true. and that they are reliable in that belief. How could I understand it such that it would be true? So happiness, to me, must be something which is not fleeting, but which is genuinely attainable. If God's will is for me to be happy, and God is not mocked, it must be an attainable thing. And my sense of happiness is that whatever is going on around me, and however well things are going materially, for me or the people around me, I feel as though I have a rock-solid core which can't be shaken. And it's summed up like this. I talked about the two eyes, the eye on the material and the eye on the spiritual. And sometimes people talk about the spiritual realm as being this entirely separate thing over there, and the material realm is what's here. Sometimes the spiritual is seen as a sort of nice little add-on or a decoration that emerges out of the material. Sometimes people go a very long way and say the only thing which is real is spiritual, and all this world is just an illusion and it's not really here, and so they don't have jobs and you have to pay for their lunch because they're just above those sorts of things. Now, the image which works for me is this, is a theatre, and Bill uses the theatre analogies a lot in the Big Book. So a play is going on in the theatre, and the emotions are real. There are real people on the stage, but you can't eat the fruit. Until I realised that there was a realm of the spirit, I was like an actor playing parts in a tragic play, Macbeth, who had no idea that the plot of Macbeth was just the plot of a play. I was lost inside the tragedy. Oswald Chambers says that the basis of life is tragic, and you have to start to accept that before you can get anywhere. No good pretending it's not. What makes it okay is the actor, whoever gets stabbed, there's a lot of blood on the floor by the end of Macbeth, whoever gets stabbed, whoever dies, the actors can have a whale of a time afterwards, as long as they remember their actors, as long as they remember, they don't so lose themselves in the emotions. The emotions are real, but they don't so lose themselves, they forget that fundamentally they're all right. And whatever happens in the play, the actor is fine. You forget you're an actor, you become invested. And imagine being in that situation. Imagine being in Macbeth, forgetting you were an actor and realising that people are dropping like flies around you. What's the first thing you're going to do? Try to control the situation, stop more of it happening. The actor won't do that. The actor who's forgotten he's an actor and thinks he's the character, the attachment to those roles that is the problem. For me, happiness is not, as it were, an emotional state of Hello Kitty pink just going on forever. It's a fundamental awareness that I am okay even if it isn't okay. Joy is slightly different. There's another little poem, one of my favourite ones. Now of my 80 years and 10, 20 will not come again. And take from 70 springs a score, it only leaves me 50 more. And since to look at things in bloom, 50 springs a little room, around the woodlands I will go to see the cherry hung with snow. Now, a lot of my life is keeping the show on the road and fulfilling obligations, but I need to create the conditions in which joy is possible by finding things to simply enjoy in the world. Interest is not inherent in anything in the world. Interest is what I bring to it. When I take an interest in people, when I take an interest in my work, when I take an interest in everything I do, joy pops through. Joy surges into my experience of those things. And it's not correlated with the thing itself. You can't explain afterwards why that thing filled you with joy. C.S. Lewis, in his essay, The Inner Ring, talks about two types of people. People that want to get over there, be in there with the movers and the shakers and be important, and the people that know, the people that understand, the people who are safe because they're running things. Then he talks about the good craftsman. And the good craftsmen recognise each other. They're just interested in doing the thing well for the sake of doing the thing well. And I find doing that, joy keeps happening the whole time. Freedom. So I do a lot of Al-Anon, and I read one day at a time in Al-Anon every day, and I'm in a little WhatsApp group where we post the reading each day and then people share on it. And I write a little thing, just 3 lines each day. And I think to myself, what's the main theme of this? And every single time, almost bar none, it comes down to detachment and let it begin with me. Someone yesterday talked about, in Buddhism, attachment being the problem. Well, what is the answer? It's detachment. And there's a curious paradox here. There was an English, I probably shouldn't say this, but there was an English journalist who made a little name for himself for a while, saying the opposite of addiction is connection, and then everyone in meetings started to repeat it like they'd thought of it themselves, and it's cute. I think my sickness when it comes to Al-Anon is this unholy entanglement with everyone and everything around me, where I don't know where I stop and they begin, where I don't take responsibility for me, but I do take responsibility for you, and I won't let you take responsibility for yourself, and I blame you for me. Disaster. The answer to all of that for me is detachment, and I don't think we're all one. G.K. Chesterton talks about this. He says, if we're all one, where does that leave love? To love, there's got to be another. If we're all one, we're just one great big self-loving lump. What's the virtue in that? The virtue in it lies in that it's the other, and that it's something which is not necessarily obviously lovable. It's not something which is doing anything for me, but I make the decision to love it. So to really love, ironically, I have to be detached. I have to have no dog in the race. I've got to have no skin in the game of your life. I've got to be reliant wholly on God. And from that position of safety, I can love other people. And I hate it when other people talk about love, so I'm going to stop there myself. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tim. We are at the place of a break until 10:45, but before we charge out the door for coffee, we're going to end with the Lord's Prayer. So if you'll join me where you're at, all together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. 10:45. See you back.